Looks like we're going. Okay. I can't believe I felt like it was just Wednesday last week, and here we are again. Okay. Today is a good one. We're going to talk about body types. So some of you may have heard this because we've done these presentations to different work sites and stuff over the years past. So my apologies if it's somewhat of a repeat for some of you, but for some of you, it'll probably be new information. We're on week 9. That means next week is the very last week. So 10 weeks flew by. Next week's will a little be more of open-ended. So I want to hear more from you guys on what you liked about the challenges over the course of the 10 weeks, what you would like to see changed, if we could ever do this again next year, pros and cons, all that kind of sharing. And we'll kind of recap what we are seeing across the board from the team. So, but first, body types. So best ways to fuel your body and to train your body based on sort of what genetics gives you as well. So body types, why does it matter what kind of body type you might be having? Well, one, it can certainly set you up for success when it comes to sports or athletic performance or that kind of thing if we follow what our body prefers. Not to say it can't be overcame with lots of training and practice, but sometimes people just have a knack for certain things because of the genetics that they have. We're going to talk about what foods help fuel certain types of body types and the activities they might endure. And then exercise patterns that we could try to follow to help optimize the body types we have. And then a little bit about how that can impact our hormones and our nervous system and the things that are kind of revved up in our system versus other types of body structures. So we'll try to weave that all in today. If you have questions as we go through, speak up because it's hard for me to monitor the chat. So don't be afraid to come off mute. So there are 3 essentially different types of body types, but very rarely does a person just fall into one body type. So when we go through these, know that you're probably not just going to fall in one of these buckets. You might lean a little way towards one or the other, but a lot of times we're a mixture. So we're not always the perfect ecto, endo, or mesomorph. So these are referred to in the scientific world as somatotypes. Like I mentioned, very few of us fall into one specific somatotype. We're often a mix, and we can certainly tweak where our body lies on that spectrum based on what we do consistently as far as nutrition and the diet habits we have, our exercise habits, and our activity habits. So you may physically have, be prone to be an ectomorph, but if you're super lazy and you eat a lot of food and that kind of stuff, you're not necessarily going to get to benefit from all the physique characteristics of an ectomorph that we'll talk about. So there's a couple examples here. Say you're a bodybuilder, you might naturally be mistaken for a mesomorph who are able to put on a lot of muscle, but it's actually the fact that you've just trained and worked really hard to help your body put on muscle mass and fueled it with a lot of protein and positive nutrition and stuff. Similarly, you're an ectomorph, you've gained a little weight around your middle, likely from being sedentary and having poor nutrition. And so you might look a little puffier than, say, a traditional ectomorph, even though that's how your body structure is. So again, we're not all in the perfect silo. This is a physical illustration of what the 3 different body types look like. So you have your ectomorph. These are your tall, lanky individuals. I shouldn't say always say tall. They're just thin, framed. Then we have endomorphs, which are on the other side of the spectrum. These tend to be your stockier, huskier individuals, and then mesomorphs are in the middle. And we'll talk a little bit about what that is. But ectomorphs typically tend to have sort of that cut frame to them where their shoulders are wide and their hips are pretty narrow. Endomorphs tend to have a wider, more of that apple shape where their waist tends to be the widest part around. And then mesomorphs are more of that straight up and down kind of physique where their shoulders and their waist are sort of in line. So we're going to start with ectomorphs. I joke that this is all what we want to be, right? Those tall, skinny people who can eat whatever they want and don't have to give a care in the world. But in all honesty, there are drawbacks and positives for being each type of body type. So don't think one is better than the other. But overall, ectomorphs are characterized as having smaller bone structures, thinner limbs. They typically are, like I said, narrow at the shoulders and, or excuse me, narrower at the hips. And they typically have that like endurance athletic look. So you think about like cross country runners, maybe even like tall basketball players can fit into this ectomorph kind of visual look. These individuals tend to run on the thyroid and sympathetic nervous systems. So they have higher sensitivities to certain kind of response hormones in our body, like catecholamines, epinephrine, norepinephrine, those types of things. This can also mean that, I don't want to say they're anxious, but they just have that alertness to them that makes their metabolism faster. And again, that's giving them sort of that lean physique. And they can tolerate carbohydrates better than the other two body types. And again, it's because their metabolism is ramped up and that's their preferred fuel source, because they're always needing that extra energy throughout the day because of just the reliance on the sympathetic nervous system and such. So, and we'll talk a little bit about how that differs from the other two body types too, but that's kind of what's going on biologically in traditional ectomorphs. So if you kind of classify as this person, you're someone who's pretty thin, small boned, you might say, or small in stature and frame. Nutrition tips would include focusing on carbohydrates. This is different than the other two body types we'll talk about. And so, a sample breakdown of what your diet might look like would be at least 55% of your calorie intake coming from carbohydrates, and then a pretty good split between protein and fat intake. And this is different than what we've generally talked about when it comes to losing weight. In past sessions, really, we've tried to focus on protein and fat, if you remember, and try to limit carbs, but most of the time ectomorphs don't have a problem burning fat or having too much excess weight. And so that's how they get away for continuing to fuel their body with excess carbohydrates, which is different than what we'll talk about with meso and endomorphs. The downside for ectomorphs is it's hard for them to, one, put on weight, and what that means, it's hard for them to gain muscle. So they're never going to, without a lot of extra work, it's going to be difficult for them to put on huge amounts of muscle mass and strength and that kind of stuff without really being diligent to their diet and exercise regimens. So there is some drawback. Sometimes these individuals can, towards the end of life, be more frail if they're not cognizant of fueling their body and getting routine exercise. So when it comes to fitness tips for an ectomorph, you guys generally have long, lean muscles and physiques. I think I referenced like the cross-country runner image for you all. When it comes to working out, you would benefit from having heavy weight lifting sessions. And again, that's because it's difficult to put on weight. So heavier weights can produce a faster, better response to putting on muscle. 3 to 5 sets, which is a decent amount of sets in your strength routine. And then you don't have to put a whole lot of focus on cardio, because that can kind of set off your muscle gains, because your fuel is using during cardio, you're burning fuel, right? And when you need to put on muscle, you need to capitalize on that fuel you're putting into your body to build muscle and not to be burned off as energy. So if you're someone who's an ectomorph who's trying to put on muscle, minimizing cardio can be helpful. Now, if you don't care about your muscle mass per se, and you're just trying to stay healthy, then certainly cardio is fine to include as an ectomorph in your general routine, as it is for any of us. So, but it can hamper you if you're someone who's trying to build muscle, because that cardio can steal away. It's kind of like the opposite of what you're trying to do with the fuel you're putting in your body. Mesomorphs, so this is sort of the middle of the road in stature, best of both worlds. So these are traditionally average size bone structure, pretty much an athletic body as well. If these individuals tend to be active routinely, like not just randomly, but routinely active, they're considered to generally have lean masses, so they're not generally overweight. They tend to focus on testosterone and growth hormone dominance hormones in their body. And so again, that those two hormones lend themselves well to growth and muscle gain. And so it's very easy for mesomorphs to put on muscle mass, but it's also easy for them to put on body fat. and vice versa. It's easy for them to lose muscle mass, but it's also easy for them to lose fat mass. So it's kind of again, the best of both worlds, as long as you are putting your behaviors and your efforts the way you want to go. It's easier for you to do one or the other. When it comes to nutrition, a mix is best, a nice balance of carbs, fats, and proteins. Like I said, again, this is sort of that moderation thing where if you're doing the things right, it's easy for you to reach your goals. But if you're ignoring those things, it's easy for you not to hit your goals. So what it looks like diet-wise is about 40% carbs, 30% protein, and 30% fat. This is similar to what we've talked about in past sessions of kind of how to balance our diet. A nice balance and moderation. When we go to the next one, it references a little bit more about helping with weight management, and it'll be a little bit of a different focus here. And like I said, it's easy for mesomorphs to gain weight, but also to gain fat or to gain muscle and lose fat. So you just have to put in the work and your body will follow along. Fitness-wise, I think I said, obviously they've got broad shoulders. They're kind of that more up and down focus. They have a little bit of a cut sometimes, but they tend to just look naturally strong and muscular. They benefit from a balance of activities, so you don't have to focus on any one thing. Generally, these folks are successful at many different types of athletics or performance types of activities. It's nice to have a nice mix of cardio, strength, functional fitness type of things. You don't really have to lift super heavy weights to put on muscle. Like I said, your body has a knack for building muscles, so it can be moderate. If you want heavy weights, that's fine. A standard strength training program is fine. And again, your body's going to respond to how you design your plan. So if you want to put on more muscle, bulk up your weights. If you're trying to lose fat, you can adjust things accordingly, and your body generally will respond. All right, the last one is the endomorph. And my mom always said she was an endomorph because she was big boned, which I hear a lot of people say. But it's not just big boned, you're also big muscled. So there's some definite benefits to being an endomorph, even though most of us think it's a curse. Larger bone structures, but also tend to have higher fat masses, but they can also have higher muscular lean mass as well. Their metabolism in general tends to be a little less active, for sure, than the ectomorphs on the other end of the scale, and therefore any excess calories are likely to be stored as fat. But it can also mean you have a greater capacity to store lean muscle mass as well. So where that ectomorph had difficulty putting on muscle, an endomorph has a great deal of capacity to putting on a lot of muscle if they work for it and not fat. Unlike the other two, the endomorph can gain fat pretty easily, and it takes a longer time to lose the fat just because how the body is kind of focusing its efforts and hormones and stuff. These typically tend to be wider around the waist, so those apple and pear shaped folks, their hips and waist are a little bit bigger than their shoulders. Nutrition-wise, this might seem ironic, but it's best to focus on high fat and high protein diets if you're an endomorph, especially if you're trying to lose weight or try to shift that mass from fat mass to lean muscle mass. And we talked a little about this in our nutrition stuff on how excess carbohydrates tend to be the culprit when it comes to storing excess fat and stuff. And so this follows suit that you want to focus most of your calorie intake on protein and fat, even though that maybe sounds counterintuitive to what we've been taught over the years, and really limit those carbohydrate intakes. So you can kind of see the breakdown there where a lot of focus is on fat and protein and a very small section compared to like the ectomorph was at 55% carbs, much less carbs in your diet here. Another thing to think about is slow and steady wins the race. So you've got to have consistent efforts because like I said, it's harder for these individuals to lose or transition that body fat out and replace it with lean mass. So it takes time. It didn't go on that fast and it's not going to come off that fast, unfortunately. Fitness-wise, these people are super strong or can be if they put in the work. High intensity workouts are super helpful because they not only help with strength and growing muscle mass, but they also require a lot of energy, which is calorie burn. So not only are you burning fat, but you're helping burn muscle. So if you've heard of like HIIT workouts, high intensity interval training, Tabata workouts. I'm trying to think some of the other terms people used back in the day, circuit trainings, those kind of things. The goal here is to try to keep somewhat of a cardio state when you're doing all sorts of different types of activities. So you're not giving your body a lot of time of rest. You're really trying to get cardio and fat burning built into your strength training or whatever type of workouts you're doing. So you can see, oh, that's supposed to say 20 to 30 minutes if cardio, sorry. You want to include cardio, certainly want to include strength training. If you can put them into the same workout, like through high intensity training and stuff, that's super helpful for people that are endomorphs. So to summarize between the three, we're probably not all falling in one bucket, right? We're kind of a little bit of mix, and certainly our behaviors for sure our adulthoods probably have impacted a little bit about where we fall on that spectrum and the behaviors that have kind of shaped us into what our bodies look like. There are other things besides somatotypes, certainly, that are influencing your health and your physique and your structure. So we've talked a little bit about hormones in past sessions. That also is impacting things. What your diet looks like, that's probably the most important factor of what our health looks like. Lack of physical activity or including physical activity is impacting your body, and even injury and illnesses, diseases can all impact our ability to lose weight, gain muscle, lose muscle, all that kind of stuff, and what our physical appearance looks like. So the big takeaway I hope you all feel is that there isn't one preferred body type. They all have a value in one shape or form. And you can still be healthy in any one of those buckets, right? Unfortunately, in America, we're really fixated on certain physiques at certain periods in history. And right now it tends to be the skinny, lean ones, but that wasn't always the case. Mesomorphs had their day, endomorphs certainly had their day, and now it seems to be the ectomorphs' turn. But love what the body God gave you and focus on that. I just put up a few different pictures of different professional or celebrities and athletes that have various different types of body structures, but they all are at the peak or were at the peak of their profession, their performance, whatever you might have. So it doesn't matter what bucket you fall in. Focus on what your body likes to do for exercise rather than just how it looks. You can certainly capitalize, obviously, on sort of the traits that you're strongest in. And I think a big takeaway is just try not to compare yourself to others or get, carried away with what you're seeing on social media or anything like that to dissuade you or discourage you about what you can do to keep your body healthy, because it's certainly more than looks when it comes to health. So that was a quick one, but if you have questions, I'll take them now. I am just going to put a brief plug in next week. Since it's week 10, we're coming back out for those post in-body scans. So your team captains got an email yesterday to reserve the time. They want me to come back out and do the scans. So check back with them. I was going to pull up the schedule and see, you guys can kind of see here. If I can zoom in on that at all. Where's my zoom? A few teams have put their schedules in already, but I'm still waiting to hear from a few more. So I will send this out as soon as all the teams respond to everybody, so you know when we'll be there next week at your site. I do have bad news to share. Our in-body printer port broke, so I won't be able to print you comparisons pre and post. I'll still be able to print you your scan next week, but you'll have to do the comparison on your own, because due to privacy issues on the machine for HIPAA, it doesn't allow me, when I'm hooking up a new printer, to go back to old results because you guys didn't give me permission to access old ones, only the new ones on the new printers. So you'll still get the same printout. It just won't have that little trend on the bottom, which isn't the end of the world. You'll still be able to see your two in-body scores and compare. And if you don't have the pre one, I can reprint it. It's just not going to trend, so I'm sorry. But all that to say, we are hoping to purchase a new machine with better upgrades and stuff in July. So if we do this challenge again, hopefully that problem is no longer an issue. But we'll have it out next week, so stay tuned for when we'll be coming to your site if you're not already on this list. And if you're team captain on here, check with your team to see when a good time to come out is if you're not already in there. So, any questions? Y'all are quiet. All right. Okay, I will stop the recording and then we'll talk to you guys all next week.